London mornings had a way of swallowing people whole. Gray skies pressed low over the city, and the streets shimmered faintly with last night's rain. Umbrellas bobbed like dark petals on the pavements, and the air smelled faintly of coffee, exhaust, and something weary, like a sigh the city hadn't quite finished. Emma Parker stood in the kitchen of her small flat in Southwark, one hand holding a piece of toast, the other scrolling through unread emails. The clock on the wall ticked with cruel precision. She was already 10 minutes late. Again. She tossed the toast into the sink, grabbed her sketchbook, and slung her coat over her shoulder. Her phone buzzed, a reminder about the client meeting she was supposed to present at. The words glared up at her like a scolding teacher. 9 a.m. Do not be late this time. Perfect, she muttered, locking the door behind her. The pavement was slick, and her boots slapped rhythmically against it as she half walked, half jogged to the tube. London moved around her in that familiar, indifferent rhythm, buses growling, horns bleating, people rushing nowhere fast. Emma felt invisible in it all, another commuter in a blur of damp coats and tired faces. She reached the station just as the train doors chimed. She slipped inside at the last second, catching her breath as they clamped shut behind her. The carriage was packed shoulder to shoulder, strangers pressed together in silence. The scent of rain-soaked wool filled the air. Someone's newspaper brushed her arm. A baby fussed somewhere down the line. Emma fumbled with her headphones, but they crackled and died. Of course! Without the music to drown out the world, she suddenly noticed everything: the hum of the tracks, the murmur of half-heard conversations, the distant metallic screech each time the train curved. Then it happened. As the carriage lurched, Emma stumbled forward, catching herself on a pole, but not before nearly stepping on someone's foot. "Oh God, sorry," she blurted out. The man she almost collided with looked up from his book. He had soft brown hair, a week's worth of stubble, and those kind eyes that could disarm anyone. He smiled, a quick, slightly awkward smile, and shook his head. "No harm done," he said, his voice calm, warm, like a cup of tea after a long day. Emma smiled back, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I swear, these trains are designed to embarrass people." He chuckled. "I think that's part of the London experience. A daily test of dignity." They shared a small laugh, the kind that lingered just long enough to make the silence afterward feel different, softer somehow. The train rocked again, and this time Emma managed to steady herself without incident. She glanced at the man's book, Letters from an Astronomer. Not the kind of thing you usually saw during rush hour. "You read that every morning?" she asked before she could stop herself. He looked up again, surprised but amused. "Trying to. It's about a man who sends love letters to the stars." "That's oddly romantic," she said, smiling. He tilted his head. "Oddly, yes." The train slowed, the robotic voice announcing the next station. Emma felt an unexpected flicker of disappointment. She didn't even know his name. He turned a page casually. "Do you usually talk to strangers on the tube?" "Only when I nearly destroy their shoes," she said. That made him laugh, a real laugh, not the polite, kind people use in public. For a moment, it drowned out the clatter of the train, the noise of the city. When the doors opened, she hesitated. Her stop. "Well," she said, clutching her bag, "hope your shoes survive the rest of the journey." He smiled again, that same awkward charm. "And I hope your day gets better from here." She stepped out onto the platform, the rush of air following her like a goodbye. The train doors closed, and she caught one last glimpse of him through the window, still watching her, that same gentle smile on his face. And just before the train disappeared into the tunnel, she realized she was smiling too. For the first time in weeks, her morning didn't feel ordinary at all. The rest of that day felt like walking through a dream she couldn't quite shake. Emma tried to focus on work, on client designs, deadlines, and a boss who measured time in size, but her mind kept drifting back to the tube. Back to that moment. That laugh. Those eyes. It was ridiculous, really. London was filled with strangers. People brushed past you, exchanged polite smiles, and vanished into the crowd. That was how it worked. But there was something about him. Every time she closed her laptop, his voice echoed in her head, It's about a man who sends love letters to the stars. She didn't even know his name, and yet somehow he felt like an unfinished sentence she couldn't stop rereading. By Friday, she found herself taking the same train again. Same time, same carriage. She told herself it was just convenience. The timing worked, that was all. But she stood in the exact same spot. The one near the door, opposite the faded poster for some forgotten art exhibit. Just in case. The train filled. Commuters shuffled in, heads down, earbuds in. The doors hissed shut. Her heart thudded, ridiculous and hopeful. But he wasn't there. She laughed under her breath, feeling suddenly foolish. Of course he wasn't. What were the odds? Still, she couldn't help glancing up every time someone new stepped on. A tall man with dark hair, not him. A student juggling coffee and textbooks, not him. By the third stop, she forced herself to let it go. Move on, Emma. She pulled out her sketchbook and started doodling, a habit that always calmed her. But instead of logo drafts or floral patterns, her pencil traced a pair of eyes. His eyes. She shut the book quickly, cheeks warm. This was absurd. She didn't even know what she was waiting for. That evening, London was drenched in gold. The rain had cleared, leaving puddles that caught the sunset like small mirrors. Emma stopped at a street cafe near Covent Garden, ordered tea, and sat by the window. She watched people pass, lovers hand in hand, tourists taking photos, musicians playing beneath flickering lights. It was one of those rare evenings where the city felt almost kind. Her phone buzzed. A message from her friend Lily. Still alive? Haven't seen you in days. Drinks tomorrow? Emma smiled and typed back. Promise. I'll be there. Just been busy chasing trains. The next morning, she arrived at the station early 5 minutes before her usual train. She pretended not to care, scrolling aimlessly through her phone. The 8:32 arrived. She stepped in, breath catching without reason. Still no sign of him. She sighed, leaning against the door. Maybe some people are just meant to be passing chapters. Small reminders that life is still capable of surprise. Then, as the train jerked forward, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned. It was him. That same smile, half nervous, half familiar, standing right there, holding a takeaway coffee and looking as surprised as she felt. Sorry, he said, catching her expression. Didn't mean to startle you. Just thought I recognized you. Emma blinked. You're the one who reads love letters to stars. He laughed softly. And you're the one who nearly crushed my shoes. Their eyes met, and this time, the silence between them wasn't awkward. It was charged, warm, alive. The train rocked, and for a brief second, their shoulders brushed. Neither moved away. When the next stop came, he gestured to the empty seat beside him. I'm Daniel, by the way. Emma. Nice to finally meet you properly. She smiled. You make it sound like we've known each other. He tilted his head thoughtfully. Maybe we were just waiting to notice. The train carried them onward through the tunnels of the city, two strangers, no longer strangers, sitting side by side while London rushed past above them. For Emma, it was suddenly clear. Some missed connections don't stay missed forever. By the time the train reached Oxford Circus, Emma and Daniel were already laughing like old friends. He told her about his job, an editor at a small publishing house in Bloomsbury, which immediately made sense. He had that quiet, bookish calm about him. She'd told him about her design work, how she loved color, hated deadlines, and lived above a flower shop that smelled perpetually of roses and coffee. Roses and coffee, he'd said, smiling. That sounds like a poem waiting to happen. She rolled her eyes, grinning. Only if you promise not to rhyme love with above. He laughed, and it echoed between them, light and effortless, like something the city had been waiting to hear. When the train stopped, neither moved. Finally, Daniel glanced at the doors, then back at her. Coffee? He asked. You know, before one of us vanishes into the crowd again. She hesitated just long enough for him to notice, then nodded. Only if it's decent coffee. I know a place, he said. Small, quiet, and doesn't serve coffee in jam jars. Sold. They walked through the drizzle to a corner cafe tucked behind an old bookshop. The kind of place that still had mismatched chairs and the smell of baked bread. A bell chimed as they entered. Inside, the warmth hit instantly, a mix of roasted beans, cinnamon, and the faint hum of jazz. Emma slipped into a corner seat by the window while Daniel ordered 2 flat whites. Through the fogged glass, London looked soft, blurred, and golden. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about emails or deadlines. She was just there. When he came back with their drinks, he sat across from her, smiling that same hesitant smile she'd already memorized. "So," he said, stirring his coffee. "Do you usually stalk strangers on the tube?" She raised an eyebrow. "Do you usually read love letters to stars?" "Touché." They both laughed. It was easy, dangerously easy. The conversation drifted from favorite books to bad first dates to why Londoners apologize even when someone else bumps into them. He had a way of listening that made silence feel comfortable, like space to breathe. At one point, she asked, "Do you believe in fate?" Daniel looked thoughtful. "I don't know. I think sometimes the universe just nudges people toward each other. Not for forever, maybe, but for a reason." She smiled faintly. "So, what's the reason here?" He met her eyes, serious now. "Maybe to remind us that not every morning has to be ordinary." Something shifted then, subtle but real. Emma looked down, tracing her finger along the rim of her cup. "You sound like one of those hopeless romantics." He shrugged lightly. "Maybe I am. I just don't always admit it." A pause. Then she said quietly, "I used to be one too." He tilted his head. "Used to?" "Yeah. Somewhere between long nights and short deadlines, I think I lost that part." She gave a small, self-conscious laugh. "Now I just design wedding invites for people I don't even believe will stay together." Daniel didn't smile. He just said softly, "That's kind of sad." "It's honest," she said. "Honest can still be sad." The honesty in his voice surprised her, the way he said it, not as judgment, but as recognition. Like he'd been there too. After a moment, she asked, "What about you? You talk about fate, but you don't sound convinced." He looked out the window. "There was someone once," he said quietly. "We had plans, big ones. Then life happened differently." She didn't press. He didn't explain. But between them, the air thickened with unspoken things, grief, maybe, or memory. Then he smiled again, small and tired. "Sorry. That got heavy." Emma shook her head. "No, it didn't. It got real." Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight spilled weakly across the street. The city seemed to pause, just long enough for them to notice it. When they finally stood to leave, he hesitated by the door. "Same train tomorrow?" he asked. She smiled. "If the universe insists." He grinned. "Then I'll take that as a yes." As she walked away, Emma caught her reflection in the shop window, cheeks flushed, eyes brighter than she'd seen them in months. Maybe fate wasn't about destiny at all. Maybe it was just about noticing someone when the world told you to look away. Sundays in London had their own rhythm. The city woke slowly, stretching through drizzle and the smell of warm bread. Stalls unfurled like bright sails across Brick Lane, vendors calling out over the clatter of crates and the hum of traffic. Emma wasn't supposed to be there. She had work piled high on her desk, a deadline that was already slipping. But Daniel had texted the night before, "If you're not doing anything tomorrow, there's a market that sells the best cinnamon buns in the city." A proper bribe. She'd stared at the message for a full minute before replying, "You had me at cinnamon." Now she stood among a crowd of umbrellas, rain misting her hair, scanning faces until she saw him. Daniel was by a coffee stall, hands tucked into his coat pockets, hair slightly damp. He waved, and for some reason, that small, shy gesture felt like sunlight. "You made it," he said. "Of course. You promised cinnamon buns." He grinned. "I never make empty promises." They wandered between stalls, brushing shoulders in the press of people. He bought 2 buns, still warm, dusted with sugar. The first bite melted on her tongue, sweet, buttery, dangerous. "Okay," she admitted, "you were right. These might actually be better than fate." He laughed. "Careful. That's heresy." They drifted past antique jewelry, old records, and second-hand books. Daniel stopped at a stand piled high with dog-eared paperbacks, his fingers tracing the spines like he was greeting old friends. "Found anything?" she asked. He pulled out a copy of Pride and Prejudice, the cover soft with age. "It's missing the first chapter," he said. "But maybe that's the best part, starting in the middle." She tilted her head. "You think stories are better that way?" He looked at her, eyes warm. "Sometimes the beginning doesn't matter as much as where you end up." The words landed deeper than either expected. By noon, the rain had stopped. They carried paper cups of coffee and sat on the steps of an old church, watching the market sway around them. Children chased pigeons, buskers played violin beneath a balcony of flowers. Daniel told her about growing up in Bristol, about his father's bookstore that had closed years ago. "That's probably why I ended up editing," he said. "Books feel like home." She smiled. "And yet you read love letters to the stars." He shrugged. "Habit, maybe. Hope." Then he asked, "What about you?" "Always wanted to design. Always wanted to create," she said. "Design was just practical creativity. My parents thought it sounded safe." He studied her quietly. "And is it?" She laughed softly. "Not even close." For a while, they just watched the street, the pulse of London in its Sunday skin. A breeze carried the smell of coffee and rain. Then Daniel said, almost to himself, "It's strange, isn't it? How you can meet someone twice, and it feels like you're remembering them." Emma turned to him. "You mean déjà vu?" "No," he said. "More like recognition." Something in his voice, the low sincerity of it, sent a quiet tremor through her. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. Before either of them could say more, a gust of wind knocked over a nearby stand, sending scarves fluttering like wild flags. They jumped up to help, laughing as they caught tumbling cloth and runaway receipts. When they finally sat back down, breathless, their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. As afternoon faded, he walked her toward the station. The streetlights blinked on, one by one. "Same train tomorrow?" he asked again, almost playfully. She smiled. "If I'm not trapped under a mountain of deadlines." "I'll take my chances," he said. "Besides, I owe you a book with the first chapter intact." They parted with that, a promise disguised as a joke. On the train home, Emma rested her head against the window. The reflection staring back at her was smiling, a small, secret smile that didn't belong to work or worry. Somewhere between cinnamon and conversation, ordinary life had started to taste different. By Tuesday, the city had returned to its usual rhythm, buses sighing at every stop, phones buzzing, people walking fast and looking down. But for Emma, everything felt just a little offbeat. Every sound, every flicker of the day seemed to echo with the faint memory of Sunday, of cinnamon sugar, and the way Daniel had looked at her like he was memorizing a story only he could read. She caught the same tube again, same time, same carriage. And there he was. A small, quiet smile, like a secret they both carried now. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, and suddenly that one word felt too simple for what it meant. They started to talk every morning, small things at first, coffee preferences, book recommendations, London's unpredictable weather. But slowly, their conversations deepened. Daniel listened the way few people did, not just hearing, but understanding. One evening, he suggested they grab dinner after work. "Somewhere with good pasta and bad lighting," he said. "Makes everything feel cinematic." Emma laughed. "So you're after atmosphere, not food?" "I'm after both," he said. "But mostly good company." The restaurant was a tucked-away Italian place near Shoreditch, narrow tables, candles dripping wax down green bottles, the scent of basil and wine thick in the air. Emma had dressed simply, a black jumper, hair loose, just enough lipstick to feel brave. When she arrived, Daniel was already there, thumbing through a battered paperback. "What are you reading this time?" she asked. He turned the cover toward her. "The Great Gatsby." She smiled. "A classic romantic with a tragic streak." "Fitting." He smirked. "Depends on how you define tragedy." Dinner flowed easily. They traded stories, embarrassing first jobs, favorite films, irrational fears. She confessed she'd once fainted during a client presentation. He admitted he couldn't swim. And somewhere between the laughter and the flicker of candlelight, a deeper quiet settled, that rare kind of silence that feels full instead of empty. Then, without warning, Daniel went still. His gaze drifted to the window, not at the rain or the street, but somewhere far away. "Daniel," she asked softly. He blinked, forced a smile. "Sorry. Thought I saw someone I knew." She turned to look, but the street outside was empty except for a man closing an umbrella. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he said quickly, too quickly. "Just memories. They sneak up sometimes." Later, as they walked toward the station, she could sense something fragile in the space between them, something he wasn't saying. When they reached the entrance, he hesitated. "Emma," he said, "I need to tell you something. About me." Her heart lifted and sank at the same time. "Okay," she said quietly. But before he could speak, a phone rang sharp, sudden, insistent. He looked at the screen, his face tightening. "Sorry," he muttered. "I have to take this." He stepped away, his voice low and urgent, words carried away by the wind. Emma stood there, arms folded, watching the city lights blur. When he came back, the easy warmth from dinner was gone. "Everything all right?" she asked. He nodded, but the lie was visible in his eyes. "Just work stuff. I'll explain another time." They said goodbye at the platform, a hesitant distance between them now. On the train home, Emma replayed the night in her head, the laughter, the look on his face when the phone rang, the way his voice had changed. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe the story they were writing together was real. But as she stepped off at her stop, she noticed something strange, a folded piece of paper sticking out from her coat pocket. Her heart jumped. She hadn't put it there. It was a torn page from a book, The Great Gatsby. And on it, in Daniel's handwriting, were 3 words. "Some endings begin." London had a way of repeating itself. Gray skies, sudden rain, strangers brushing shoulders on crowded platforms. But for Emma, the city no longer felt ordinary. Everything reminded her of Daniel. His smile, his voice, the way he looked at her like he was still trying to memorize her. And yet, beneath the sweetness, something had changed. The note he'd left in her pocket still sat on her bedside table. "Some endings begin." She'd read it a dozen times, trying to decide whether it was poetic or ominous. It was Friday when the rain came back. A heavy, relentless drizzle that blurred the windows of her office and turned the streets to mirrors. She texted Daniel, "Rain's back. Should we call it fate?" No reply. By evening, she was walking home under her umbrella, damp hair clinging to her face. She passed the flower stall near her building, closed early, petals drooping in the rain, and was about to keep walking when she saw him. Daniel. Standing on the opposite pavement, coat soaked through, no umbrella, staring right at her. For a second, the noise of the city fell away. She crossed the street quickly. "Daniel, what are you doing here? You'll catch pneumonia." He gave a crooked smile. "Just walking. Thinking. You didn't answer my text. Phone died." He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, water dripping from his hair. Emma frowned. "Come on. You're freezing. My flat's 5 minutes away." He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Inside, she handed him a towel and one of her oversized hoodies. It was comically small on him, the sleeves barely reaching his wrists, but it made her laugh, and that laugh seemed to thaw him a little. She made tea. The rain drummed softly against the windows. "So," she said gently, "want to tell me what's really going on?" Daniel stared into his cup. "It's complicated. I can handle complicated." He looked up at her then, really looked. "You shouldn't have to." "Daniel," she said quietly, "you don't get to decide that for me." He set his tea down, rubbed his face with his hands, then said, "You remember the photo I told you about, my dad's bookstore?" She nodded. "He wasn't just a bookseller," Daniel continued. "He collected things. Old manuscripts, letters, rare editions, things people probably didn't want found. When he died, I inherited a lot of it. Some of it was valuable. Some of it wasn't supposed to exist." Emma's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say there are collectors who think everything has a price, and they don't like when something goes missing." He met her eyes. "The call the other night wasn't work. It was someone looking for a book my father left me. And I think they've found me." The room fell quiet except for the rain. "Daniel," she whispered, "is this dangerous?" He gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Probably. But I didn't want to disappear again without telling you." "Again?" He looked away. "This isn't the first time I've had to start over." For a long moment, Emma said nothing. Her mind spun between fear, confusion, and something far stranger, the ache of wanting to believe him. "You could have just told me," she said finally. "I wanted to," he said, his voice low. "But I didn't want you pulled into it. You deserve something simple, Emma. Ordinary." She shook her head. "I don't think ordinary exists anymore." He smiled faintly, eyes soft with regret. "I was right about you," he said. "You always see the story inside the mess." When he stood to leave, she caught his hand. "Daniel, don't disappear again." He squeezed her fingers once, gently. "If I do, you'll know where to look." Then he was gone out into the rain, coat collar turned up, vanishing down the street like a shadow in the mist. Emma stood at the window long after, watching the lights smear across the wet glass. And for the first time since she'd met him, she felt the unmistakable chill of being part of something much bigger and far more dangerous than love. 2 days passed. No texts, no calls, no sign of Daniel. Emma told herself not to worry, that maybe he needed time, that maybe everything he said was true but not as dangerous as it sounded. But that didn't stop the unease. She still had his mug in her sink, the one he'd used that rainy night. The towel she'd handed him hung on the radiator, still faintly smelling of his cologne. It all felt like evidence of a life that might not have been real. Monday morning came gray and restless. She took the tube to work, headphones in but music off, mind racing. At every station, she expected him to appear, that same crooked smile, that same soft morning. He didn't. By lunchtime, she gave in to the gnawing feeling. She left her office early and walked back to her flat, the city humming around her like static. When she reached her building, she froze. The door to her flat was slightly ajar. Her breath caught. She pushed it open slowly, heart pounding. Inside, nothing looked obviously disturbed, no drawers open, no smashed glass. But she knew immediately that someone had been there. The window was unlatched. The faint smell of cigarette smoke hung in the air. And on her coffee table sat a single object that hadn't been there before, a book. Old, worn, its cover cracked. The Great Gatsby. Her pulse quickened. She approached it like it might bite. There was a slip of paper inside, a page torn from another book, with handwriting she didn't recognize. "He can't protect you. Leave while you can." Emma sat down hard on the couch, her hands trembling. Someone had broken in just to leave that? She grabbed her phone and typed a message to Daniel. "Someone was in my flat. I found a book. What's going on?" The message went through, but no response came. Not after 5 minutes. Not after an hour. By nightfall, she was pacing the room. The shadows in the corners felt heavier than usual. Finally, a knock came at the door. Sharp. Measured. She froze. "Emma? It's me. Daniel." When she opened the door, relief and fear collided in her chest. He looked worse than before, tired, soaked again, as if he hadn't slept in days. "I came as soon as I got your message," he said. "Are you okay?" "Someone broke in," she said, her voice shaking. "They left a book." "Your book." He stepped inside, saw it on the table, and his face drained of color. "Where did you find this?" "It was just there when I came home." He picked it up with careful hands, turning it over like a fragile relic. "This isn't mine," he said quietly. "But whoever left it knows exactly what they're doing." "What does that mean?" He met her eyes, something dark flickering there. "It means they're close." She felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Daniel, please. Just tell me what's happening." He exhaled slowly. "The book my father left me, the one thereafter, it wasn't just rare. It contained letters, hidden inside the binding. Personal letters between two people who shouldn't have been writing to each other." "Who?" "An art dealer and a politician. If the letters were ever made public, it would ruin more than one career. My father didn't realize what he had until it was too late." "And now you have it," she said. He nodded. "So whoever broke in thinks I told you where it is," he finished. which means you're now part of this whether we like it or not. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain outside whispered against the glass. Then Daniel said softly, "You should leave town, Emma. Just for a few days. Stay with a friend. Let me sort this out. And what about you?" He gave a faint, broken smile. "I'm good at running. Always have been." She stepped closer, anger mixing with fear. "You don't get to disappear again. Not when someone's threatening me. Not when you started this." For a long second, he just looked at her, eyes full of guilt and something deeper, something almost like love. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For all of it." Then, before she could stop him, he turned and left again, into the night, into the rain. Emma stood by the door long after he was gone. The city beyond her window pulsed with light, but she'd never felt more alone. And on the table, that book sat open, as if waiting for its next chapter to begin. The night didn't end. It just faded into morning. Emma sat on the couch, staring at the Great Gatsby lying open in front of her. The words blurred. Every creak of the building made her jump. When the light finally began to filter through the blinds, she felt hollow, emptied of sleep. She poured herself a cup of stale coffee and turned the book over in her hands again. If someone had gone to the trouble of breaking in just to leave it, then the answer, or at least a clue, had to be inside. She took a breath and began flipping through the pages carefully. Most of it was normal, but about halfway through she noticed something strange. The spine felt uneven, thicker. She pressed her thumb along it and felt a faint ridge. Her pulse quickened. She fetched a small craft knife from her desk and, with trembling fingers, slit the inner edge of the binding. The spine split slightly, and there it was. A strip of folded, yellowing paper, hidden deep between the glue and the cloth. The handwriting was neat, slanted, old-fashioned. "If you are reading this, the book found you. That means Edward failed to deliver it or chose not to. Inside the letters you will find proof of what they did. Do not trust anyone who claims to protect you. They only protect themselves." There was no signature. Just initials, LM. Emma stared at the page. The same initials had been stamped on one of the letters Daniel once showed her weeks ago, the ones his father had accidentally acquired. She remembered him saying the letters were from a romance that could ruin reputations. Now, reading this, she realized they weren't love letters at all. They were evidence. Evidence of something powerful enough that people were still chasing it decades later. And Daniel had lied. By the time she looked up, the rain had stopped. The city outside her window was waking, unaware of the quiet panic rising inside her chest. She grabbed her phone and dialed Daniel again. No answer. She tried once more, this time leaving a voicemail. "Daniel, I know about the letter in the spine. I know what your father found. You need to tell me everything. Please." She hung up. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed, but it wasn't a call. It was a message. "Unknown number. Stop looking. He's not who you think he is." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She stared at the screen, then typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. By afternoon, she couldn't stay still. She took the book and headed for the British Library, hoping to find something, anything, about the names or initials. Inside the quiet vastness of the reading room, she felt small but determined. She requested old records, newspapers, and auction ledgers connected to rare manuscripts. An hour later, her search found something that made her breath catch. 1953, Private Sale Dispute. A collection of wartime letters between Lillian Moore and Edward Harrow had gone missing from the estate of a late member of Parliament. The letters were rumored to contain details of a political scandal, including evidence of stolen art pieces smuggled through London after the war. LM and H, the same initials from the note. The story matched Daniel's version, except for one detail. The article mentioned that Edward Harrow's son had been implicated in the disappearance of the letters, a man named Daniel Harrow. Emma's skin went cold. The Daniel she knew had never given a last name. She'd never even thought to ask. And now she understood why. The phone buzzed again, startling her. This time, it was him. Just one message. "Don't trust anyone from the library. Meet me at the bridge by 8. Bring the book." She read it 3 times. Her fingers trembled over the screen. Should she go? Every instinct screamed no. But her heart, the part that still believed in the man who smiled at her on a crowded tube, whispered yes. She closed the book carefully, slid it into her bag, and stood. Outside, the clouds were gathering again. Rain, soft at first, then harder, as if London itself was warning her not to go. But she went anyway. The sky was bruised purple by the time Emma reached the river. London's lights shimmered across the Thames like spilled gold, reflecting off the dark water below. The wind carried the smell of rain and the faint metallic tang of the city settling into night. She clutched her bag tight against her side, the weight of the book inside it grounding her and terrifying her at once. The bridge was nearly empty. A bus rumbled past, a cyclist whirred by, and then she saw him. Daniel. He stood by the railing, coat collar turned up, face half-shadowed. When he turned, his expression was unreadable. "You came," he said quietly. "I almost didn't," she replied. "You could have told me who you were." He winced. "I was going to. I just needed time." "You had time, Daniel," she said, stepping closer. "You had weeks. You told me your father collected books. You didn't say he stole them." "I didn't steal anything," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "My father did. I've been trying to put it right." She stared at him, trying to read truth in his eyes. "Then why lie?" "Because if I'd told you the truth," he said softly, "you'd have run, and I couldn't let you." A long silence fell between them, broken only by the wind rushing through the bridge cables. He looked older in that light, worn down by secrets. She pulled the book from her bag and held it up. "Is this what they want?" He nodded. "It's not just the letters, Emma. There's a code hidden in them, one my father cracked before he died. It leads to a list of names: collectors, politicians, smugglers. People who've been moving stolen art through London for decades. If this list gets out, half the city's elite will burn." "And you have it?" "I had it," he said grimly. "Now they think you do." Her stomach turned cold. "Then why tell me to come here? Why not stay hidden?" "Because they followed you," he said. "And this is the only place I can keep you safe long enough to end it." A figure stepped out from the shadows at the far end of the bridge, tall, wearing a dark coat. Then another. Emma's breath caught. "Daniel." "I know," he said quietly. "Stay behind me." The two figures approached, slow and deliberate. One of them called out, voice calm but cold. "Daniel Harrow. You've made this very difficult." Emma recognized that voice. It was the man who'd come to her shop weeks ago asking about old books, the one who'd smiled too easily. "I told you," Daniel said, his tone suddenly hard. "It ends tonight." The man laughed softly. "Be sensible. Hand it over and we'll all walk away." Emma's heart hammered. "Daniel." But Daniel turned, meeting her gaze. His eyes were soft again, full of everything he hadn't said. "Emma," he whispered. "When you met me that morning, I thought it was coincidence. Now I think it was something else, a second chance to do something right." He pressed the book back into her hands. "Run." "What?" "No. Run, Emma. Please." Then everything happened at once. A shout. The sound of rushing feet. Daniel shoved her aside just as one of the men lunged. The book slipped from her fingers, skidding across the wet pavement. She turned back in time to see Daniel swing around, catching the man by the coat and sending him staggering backward. The other reached for something inside his jacket, a flash of metal under the lamplight. "Daniel!" she screamed. The crack of a gunshot split the night. Time seemed to fold in on itself. The lights, the rain, the river, everything slowed to a dull, endless echo. Daniel stumbled. For a heartbeat, he stayed upright, as if even gravity was reluctant to let him fall. Then he collapsed to his knees. Emma ran to him, dropped beside him on the cold stone. Blood bloomed dark on his shirt, spreading fast. "Stay with me," she whispered, choking back tears. "Please." He smiled weakly, eyes unfocused, but still trying to find hers. "Some endings," he breathed. "Begin." Then his hand went slack. The sound of sirens rose somewhere far away. The men were gone. The book lay abandoned by the railing, rain washing over its pages. Emma clutched Daniel's hand, the world spinning around her. And beneath the city's glittering lights, love, fragile, reckless, and real, slipped quietly into memory. The city never really stops. Even the night Daniel died, London carried on. Buses hissed, lights blinked across the Thames, and strangers hurried home through rain that washed everything clean except grief. Emma didn't remember the ambulance leaving. She didn't remember the police questions or the cold fluorescent light of the station where she gave her statement. All she remembered was the river, black and endless, swallowing the reflections of 1,000 stories that would never be told. Weeks passed in fragments. She worked, but her designs looked empty. She slept, but never through the night. Sometimes she thought she saw him in the crowd, that crooked half-smile, the way he pushed his hair back when thinking, but it was always someone else. The only thing she kept was the book. The Great Gatsby sat on her windowsill like a ghost that refused to leave. The police had returned it after the investigation. No fingerprints except hers and Daniel's, no usable evidence. Case closed. A random act of violence, they said. Emma knew better. One evening, unable to stand the stillness, she opened the book again. The pages were warped from rain, the ink smudged. She turned each one slowly, half expecting the letters to have vanished. Then something fell out, a small square of paper, sealed with wax. She hadn't seen it before. Inside, Daniel's handwriting. Emma, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. I'm sorry. The letters are safe now. What matters isn't the scandal or the names, it's proof that truth outlives lies. Keep it that way. Don't run from it. And don't let this story end with me. D. Her hands trembled. Beneath the note was a folded address, Harrow and Company, Antiquarian Books, Bristol. His father's old shop. 2 days later, she was on a train heading west. Outside, the landscape blurred into green and gray, the English countryside dissolving under steady drizzle. She arrived in Bristol at dusk and found the shop easily, a narrow front squeezed between a cafe and a laundrette, its windows dust-clouded, the sign faded. Inside, it smelled of paper and time. Shelves sagged under the weight of forgotten stories. On the counter sat a single envelope with her name written across it. For Emma, if she ever comes. Inside were photocopies of the missing letters. Dozens of them, coded notes between Lillian Moore and Edward Harrow, Daniel's grandparents. They weren't just lovers. They were the whistleblowers who had tried to expose the art smuggling ring after the war. The affair, the secrecy, it had all been cover for the truth. Daniel hadn't been running from guilt. He'd been finishing what they started. Emma stayed there until closing, reading every line, piecing together the history he'd died protecting. When she stepped outside, the rain had started again, soft and familiar. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "You did it, Daniel." The wind carried the words away, but somehow she felt they'd found him. Back in London, she opened a new file on her computer. Project Letters in the Rain. A digital exhibition, part art, part story, part confession, built from scans of the letters, Daniel's photographs, and her own designs. She wrote an introduction. This is a story about truth, about the way love survives inside it. About how one person's courage can echo through another's heart long after they're gone. When it went live, messages flooded in from historians, journalists, strangers who'd stumbled on the site and couldn't stop reading. Within days, the story spread, an old scandal uncovered, yes, but also something gentler, a love letter to lost causes and found courage. A week later, Emma walked to the same bridge. The city shimmered again, rain-slick, alive, unchanged. She placed The Great Gatsby on the railing, the pages fluttering in the wind, and whispered, "For you." Somewhere in the distance, a busker started playing violin. The river moved beneath her feet like time itself. And for the first time since that gray morning on the tube, she didn't feel lost. She felt part of something vast, unfinished, and full of light.